Hello everyone, welcome to GS Core. So we are back with our daily current affairs through MCQs. So as part of this exercise, we cover the MCQs based on today's current affairs. Right? So let us quickly glance through the topics on which the questions are based for today's session. So if you look at, we have covered Guinea worms diseases in news are important, right? Similarly, topics related to the idea of pollution, terminologies with regards to international relations, the aspect of trade, location and IR, and certain instruments, concepts, terms related to the economy and environment are important. So let us quickly get on to the very first question. So if you look at this question, it's on Guinea worms disease. Recently, it was in news that the world is on the brink, that means very close to eliminate this particular disease. So when it comes to the concept part, right, as well as the approach regarding this question, a key skill which is needed is first to map and second to correlate. And this makes for the application skill, which helps us deduce the correctness of the question. So with every such disease, you should know the regions, intensity, impact, right? The causative agent, the nature, and the relief mechanisms that exist. For example, if there is a vaccine or a medicine or a treatment of sorts. With regards to these diseases, therapies can also be in use. Along with that, symptoms. Therapies, for example, regarding cancer, it is very popular nowadays, the news about CAR-T-cell therapy, etc. And hence, it is important that we look at these questions with that approach, skill and concept in mind. So while if we look at the question, and let me read out that for you. Consider the following statements. Guinea worm disease, also known as dracunculosis, is caused by the Guinea worm. The scientific name is given, which can grow up to a meter long inside the human body. The eradication of the Guinea worm disease rely primarily on high-tech interventions such as vaccine and cures rather than basic public health principles. Right. So if you look at the approach here, it requires this application skill. What kind of a disease? This is a sort of a parasite that develops inside the human body. So can it be cured by vaccine, or is this the only solution? Rather, the common knowledge suggests that the public health principles should be good enough to prevent such. The basic understanding of science. Right? Also, the formatting, if you look, it looks at which and not how many. Right? So therefore, the precise knowledge and the use of elimination becomes important here. So let us look at the first statement. The name is given and the common name other is given, is caused by causative agent is given. So we can refer to the map, which can grow up to a meter long nature inside the human body. If we look at this aspect, this is correct. This is correct. Actually, it manifests through painful skin lesions as the adult worm emerges from the body, right? Symptoms like intense pain, swelling, and secondary bacterial infections are common. The eradication of the disease rely primarily on high-tech interventions such as vaccines and cures. This statement is incorrect. This statement is incorrect. So, the moment we come to know that the first statement is correct, we can straight away eliminate option B and D, right? So, we can narrow down our chances of success to 50%, right? However, like I said, the second statement is incorrect as it primarily relies on basic public health principles such as clean water, sanitation, awareness, etc., rather than these initiatives. So, since the first statement is correct, the second is incorrect, the correct option to mark here would be option A. Option A. So, I hope you all are making note of the way to solve this particular questions or questions of these kinds. Often there are diseases in news, like I said. Okay, for example, the zoonotic diseases, right? Viral infections, bacterial infections, etc. Moving on to the next question. And this is based on pollution, right? Primarily, if we look at this particular question, it is related to the idea of industry and pollution. Okay. So recently the Supreme Court was hearing a case about the reopening of Vedanta copper smelting plant in Tamil Nadu, right? And it was shut because of the pollution. So you see the rulings, in this case by a Supreme Court, there can be National Green Tribunal or other regulators, and the concept at the core, that is the environmental pollution, they can be mixed to form a question. Remember, the locus and the focus approach I always talk about. While the focus of a news item might just be on the smelting plant, the locus spans across to the area of pollution in general, right? So while approaching this question, we should clearly remember the linkage element. For example, in this case, when we talk about pollutions, operative measures, legislative, judicial, policy, and the tech details. For example, often with regards to pollution, you are asked the topics of nitro oxides, right? Or the suspended particulate matter. Okay, all those things are asked. So let us, look further at the formatting. If you look at the format, it's vague. Vague, I mean how many and not which. Okay, so that requires far greater degree of deduction skills, wherein the direct statement needs further examination. Okay. So let us look at the statements that are given to us. The Supreme Court stated that pollution regulators such as the Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board. So like I said, the regulators form the part of the concept. What do they do? Okay, so such authorities, their mandate, powers, functions, etc. Okay, are slack in utilizing powers under the law, leading to environmental issues. This is correct. The second statement, both TNPCB and the Thoothukudi District Administration share equal responsibility for the accumulation of toxins related to the operations of Vedanta's copper smelting plant. So while this was an industrial issue, see how it has been typecasted to an environmental issue. This statement is also correct. Justice J.B. Pardiwala, while hearing the case, emphasized on this aspect that both the district administration as well as the regulatory body are responsible. Third statement, the closure of Vedanta's copper smelting plant in 2018 was due to unspecified violations of pollution control laws. No, the idea was not the unspecified violations. It was rather the TNPCB's refusal to renew consent. Okay, so that was the central idea. Now, along with that, the laws need to be kept in mind because the question can also be on laws. For example, Water Control of Pollution Act, Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act, right? Environment Protection Act. Okay, all such acts need to be kept in mind. And hence, by the use of that larger knowledge, you will be able to use the deduction skills. Because explicitly, all the statements, if you see, will seem true. In this case, the third statement is false. So out of the three, we have two statements as correct, right? And hence, the option to mark in this case would be option B. Option B. Moving further to the next question. Terminologies like Panda diplomacy. So, whenever we talk about such terminologies, right, recently China sent pandas to US. So you see, all the pandas in the world are primarily owned by China. It is China which sends it to other countries to be kept in zoos and other zoological parks. Now, the focus of the concept and the idea is the terminology. So often when it comes to term, you have to identify the relation. So in terms of skills, it requires retention, correlation, and identification. And finally, all of it leading to deduction. Right? Why am I emphasizing? Because you see the format. The format is statement 1 explains statement 2 kind of a format. So without correlation, you cannot identify whether the second one explains the first one correctly or not, irrespective of the fact that you might identify the correctness of these statements. Often, like I said, terminologies are important. For example, detente. Henry Kissinger recently passed away, and he was famous for the detente with the China and later with the Russia. Right? Similarly, cricket diplomacy between, let's say, right now India and Australia, traditionally between India and Pakistan. Right? So these things, the terminologies are often asked in the examination. So let us look at the set of statements that we have. China's Wildlife Conservation Association is collaborating with the National Zoo in Washington to potentially bring more pandas back to the United States, indicating improvement in diplomatic relations between the two. So you see, the knowledge of the basic facts and the concepts is essential, and the identification, retention and correlation are vital for deduction. How this is? You should ask how. This is an improving sign, because the China will only send pandas if the diplomatic ties are on the side of betterment. Otherwise, it will pull the pandas, because like I said, pandas are primarily owned by China. So this statement is correct. The National Zoo in Washington recently returned 3 pandas to China, leaving no panda in the US. If you look at this statement, okay, this statement is incorrect. Yes, recently returned 3 pandas to China. This statement does not accurately represent. Okay, because there still is pandas in US. So on this tiny fact, this becomes important. This fact must be hidden somewhere in the news. Okay, because the Atlanta Zoo, okay, has a giant panda program. Okay, so that is there, right? So this statement becomes incorrect for the fact that the giant panda program continues to be there in the Atlanta Zoo, and there are certain pandas which are there, while the partial return was true. So that makes statement 1 as correct, statement 2 as incorrect. So the option to mark would be option D. Option D. Moving on to the next question. And again, trade and location are the points. So if you see location in news becomes very significant for the study of a candidate of UPSC. So recently, Israel-Hamas conflict, which is ongoing, and this has brought limelight to the region. So therefore, as a concept and an idea, you should have the map. Also, the skill identification and the retention. For example, countries, geographical features, the international relations connotation of it, significance. Because you see, the questions are going to be hybrid in nature. They will mix these aspects, which are the water bodies, mountain ranges in the region, right? And what happens there. Okay, so like I said, Israel-Hamas conflict is in news, and the Houthi rebels in Yemen threatened the sea commerce, and that is why this question has been framed. Also, if you look at the formatting, it's vague. Vague in the sense that, again, which is not asked, how many are asked. So let us take up these statements one by one. The disruption in trade caused by the Red Sea conflict has severely affected India's import of fertilizers, particularly the key product muriate of potash, sourced mainly from Jordan and Israel. So the impact is the part of analytical skill that is needed. Okay, so this skill becomes very important to analyze. What is the impact on India, right? This statement is correct. This statement is correct. Second, again, correlation and impact. The deduction. The capital goods sector faces challenges due to sustained trade disruptions, potentially leading to delayed deliveries, inventory buildup, and a slowdown in overall conversion. Now, this will only come from analysis. Otherwise, these facts without interlinking and the notion of impact will not suffice the case. So, this statement is also correct. India's crude oil supply, predominantly sourced from Russia, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, experiences a medium impact from Red Sea crisis, resulting in increased freight and insurance cost. That's again a very logical deduction, because if you see the map, and I'll try and draw that. If this is India, this is Arabian Sea, this is the Red Sea. So the ships will have to take a longer tour to bypass the heat zone where the attacks are taking place. So obviously it will increase the insurance and the logistics costs. So this statement is also correct. So if we look at all the three statements are correct, hence the answer to mark here would be option C. Option C. So similarly, you see Russia, Ukraine, Iraq, Lebanon. You should study it from both the perspectives, the factual perspective and the analytical perspective, so as to determine these statements. Similar questions can be based on these regions as well. Now, finally, towards the last question for today's session, right? It is about green bonds. Okay. So recently in the news report, right, due to the risk aversion, there is a very poor response to green bonds. Now, while this was the news or focus, let us look at the locus as well. If you look at climate finance, right, it was a focus of G20 as well, right. This is the burning area, right, and therefore we should keep a tab on this. So while approaching such a question, you should be very mindful of the concepts. Okay, what are green bonds? For example, here, so what, why, how elements, plus the impact and prevalence, how green bond market in India is. All those things should be on your fingertips. So while approaching it through these concepts and then linking and finally deduction, through those skills, you can identify whether a particular statement is correct or not. Okay, so that is the key idea. Now, let us look at the formatting. Again, the formatting is vague vis-a-vis how many and not which. So that presents a further complexity. And in questions like these, you are often, encountered with confusing statements. So deductive logic is the key skill to solve such a questions. Like green bonds, there can be other initiatives. Okay, like hybrid mutual funds, things like that can be asked. So let us look at the statements. Green bonds are financial instruments issued to fund projects with environmental benefits aiming to mitigate climate change and promote sustainability. So the what element coming here, this statement is correct. The second statement, The yield of green bonds refers to the return earned by the investors on these bonds, which may be influenced by factors such as market demand, issuer creditworthiness, and the perceived environmental impact of the funded project. This statement is also correct. This statement is also correct. That is the nature, because it's a bond instrument. So you should have the clarity of the financial instrument in question. That's the part of the concept. Third statement, the implementation of carbon border adjustment mechanism aims to address carbon leakage by imposing tariffs and taxes on imports based on carbon footprint, thereby incentivizing green bond. This statement is incorrect. Why? You see, while the CBAM is a policy tool aimed to address carbon leakage and promote emission reduction, it is not directly linked to green bonds. It is just a tariff regime. So, two concepts have been mixed in the question. Two concepts have been mixed in the question. So, CBAM actually stresses upon imposing tariffs or taxes on carbon intensive imports so as to ensure level playing field for domestic players, right? So this statement is not related. So if we see out of the three, two are correct. Hence the option to mark would be option B. Option B. Well, that sums up our today's discussion on the current affairs through these MCQs. You will find them and more in our daily compilation of current affairs called Thank You on the website, and the link for it is in the description. That's all. Thanks a lot and all the best.